Hey folks, I got Marian, Indianapolis Star. This is Mind Your Banner's postgame for Indiana 106, Marian 64. Doing my best to talk over the crowd noise here. I think long term we will probably hunt out a quieter spot for these things. This is the first one of these we've done live inside Assembly Hall. And obviously the crew has to clean the building up, and there's people working post game and all those different sorts of things. So I'm going to do my best to just kind of talk over all that. There's even a leaf blower going as people try to get all the popcorn and stuff out from under the bleachers. Just to kind of recap the game, and we will keep this short since I'm doing it solo, and obviously it's just an exhibition. But Indiana 106, Marian 64. Good night for Indiana. Some things that stood out: 77 possessions. You could really see Indiana pushing the pace at times in this game. Malik Renew looked really good again. Umar Ballo, 16.7 assists, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Obviously, Marian just wasn't going to have the personnel to manage Ballo. I thought Trey Galloway looked really good, really comfortable in his return. Had some really nice moments in transition. Obviously, Bryson Tucker, a big talking point, 19 points off the bench, 3 assists, 9 of 12 from the floor. Just really active, really athletic. It had some breakdowns defensively, as you'd expect any freshman to do. But I also thought Tucker looked really, really smart and intelligent off the ball offensively. He had 2 or 3 alley-oops that were really, I don't think they were designed plays. They were more the product of him seeing space and just being really alert to kind of where to go find offense without the ball. And that's something not a lot of freshmen don't maybe have that feel, if you understand what I'm saying, this early on. And Tucker, I thought, looked really good in that area. He earned his 19 points. You could see his mid-range game there. That looked good. I thought Mackenzie Mbako, quieter night, 10 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds, but I thought he looked good. He looked aggressive. He looked like he had a good balance, just sort of kind of in his own mind of when to push the advantage on certain things, when to back off of certain things. Listen, this game was never going to test Indiana like crazy, obviously. But I think that especially after the Tennessee game, you wanted to see, Indiana look comfortable in this game and kind of take care of business. IU led by 25 at halftime. They were up 52-25. They outscored Marian 56-39 in the second half. It is worth saying Mike Woodson kind of emptied his bench in the second half, and so the defense got a little bit lax. I mean, the other big takeaway from this game is nobody plays more than 23 minutes. And if you look at the starting 5, nobody in that starting 5 plays more than 20. Umar Ballo, Malik Renew, basically everybody in that starting 5 did one turn in the second half, and when they came out in the first round of rotations, they never came back in again. You could tell after playing a number of guys, 30 or more minutes at Tennessee, Mike Woodson was clearly interested in keeping workloads down tonight. Bryson Tucker had 23 minutes. Luke Goody had 23 minutes. Nobody else played more than 20. And so Indiana really shared that load. And again, things kind of got a little bit defensively loose there late in the game when it is kind of your walk-ons and the end of your bench that's on the floor for Indiana. Everybody who played it, just kind of to get a sense for it, everybody who played at least 11 minutes finished with a positive plus-minus. And that just kind of gives you a sense for where Indiana was defensively, kind of when it was leaning into its core rotations. Mike Woodson did say post-game Kanan Carlisle sat this game out. He's got bruised ribs. He's kind of day-to-day at this point. Anthony Leal also didn't play, but you did see 3 guys, Tucker, who we talked about, Trey Galloway, who we talked about, and Ja'Kai Newton, who made his Indiana debut, was 1 of 5 from the floor, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. I don't think Mike Woodson smiled any wider, at least during the game on Friday night, than he did when Ja'Kai Newton hit a tough basket and drew a foul kind of early in the first half, or early in his run in the first half. Bench kind of went crazy. You could tell what it meant to his teammates to see Newton back out on the floor after, well over a year spent coming back from an injury. And this is, obviously the shot you imagine will come around. Again, Newton was 1 of 5 from the floor. He missed all 3 of his 3-point attempts. But this was kind of what he was in high school: 4 rebounds, 3 assists. A player that, he always showed up in the box score. And some nights it was he shot the ball really well, he scored it really well, he was the leading scorer, etc. There were nights where he was Newton High School. He played at Newton High School. It's very confusing. There were times where he was the Rams' assist leader, rebound leader, steals leader. He just he filled gaps, on a really good team. Stephen Castle was on that team, some other high major prospects, some mid-major prospects, and Ja'Kai Newton was just always kind of a player that found a hole his team needed him to fill, whether it was scoring, rebounding, creating, whatever, defending, and he filled it. I think you saw, kind of glimpses of that tonight. Probably the one big negative takeaway from Indiana perspective is the three-point shooting, 6 of 25, only 1 of 11 in the first half, 5 of 14 in the second. So for the second straight week, kind of better in the second half. Not quite as good percentage-wise as what Indiana was when they were 4 of 8 in the second half against Tennessee. But, if you're an Indiana fan, I do think there's an extent to which you'd also just like to see your team kind of keep shooting through it. And Luke Goody, for example, was 2 of 9 in this game. I think between the Tennessee game and tonight, I think he missed his first 10 3-point attempts this season. And then he hit a couple. He kind of found his rhythm a little bit more. But listen, if you're an Indiana fan, I understand anybody who just isn't going to have a lot of grace, as I said, after that Tennessee game for this team's 3-point shooting until they see it. I would still argue, as I did for a lot of last season, you have to have the volume first. If you're not willing to take the threes, you're never going to make them. And there were times last season when Indiana was fighting uphill just to get to 15, 16 attempts in a game. They had 19 against Tennessee in a lower scoring, lower possession game. They had 25 attempts from 3 today. Again, they only had 6 of them. That's 24%. Is not very good. But I think if you're an Indiana fan, you are at least encouraged to see your team continue to shoot them and to continue the guys that you want shooting them too. McKenzie and Baca shot 5. Again, Goody shot 9. Gabe Cupps and Ja'Kai Newton combined for 6. It's not like guys that you don't want shooting those shots are putting them up in bad late clock situations or bad offense. A lot of them are good shots. They're not going down. At some point, Indiana needs to see them go down to feel that confidence. But or at least you want to know that Indiana, if you're an Indiana fan, is going to keep shooting them and at some point kind of give itself the opportunity basically to find its range. And, listen, we do this a lot with exhibition games when we talk about positive outcomes and positive developments. Malik Renew, as an example, another really good night tonight, 18 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, no fouls in just 18 minutes. He also had a block and a steal. A lot of times in these exhibitions, we say, hey, temper anything overly optimistic when a team plays well or when a player has a good performance. Well, sometimes you have to temper that the other way too. It's still the preseason. Who knows what these guys are doing from a practice perspective in the days leading up to games. Again, I've covered enough bad shooting Indiana teams to understand why IU fans are going to see 10 of 44 across 2 exhibition games and fear, that kind of it's all a little bit of history repeating. But in the same breath, I think the 44 is encouraging, not just because Indiana's taken threes, but because Indiana's giving itself the opportunity to find its shooting rhythm. It's giving itself an opportunity that, frankly, it has not given itself the last 3 years consistently to sort of find that 3-point shot. And the right guys are taking them. And if you're Mike Woodson, you just kind of have to have faith that eventually they'll start going in. The other big thing from tonight, and if anybody's got questions, chime in. I won't go much longer than this, but happy to answer 1 or 2 if people jump in. And if not, I totally understand. It's Friday night, and I got an early morning tomorrow getting up to East Lansing. The other part of tonight that I think is unavoidable is Pat Knight's return. It was emotional in the building pregame. Mike Woodson gave Knight a hug on the floor before the game. He also climbed up into the stands and gave Nancy Knight, Pat's mother, a hug. Spent some time, obviously, with Steve Downing. Woodson and Steve Downing, who is the AD up at Marian, are very close. This is the 1-year anniversary of Bob Knight's death. A lot of people were wearing stuff honoring Bob Knight, including Pat Knight. You just kind of got the sense it was, as a coach, this is Knight's first year at Marian. As a coach, you got the sense he felt good about challenging his team with a very difficult game early on as a in terms of the symbolic nature of it. I think you could tell what it meant to everyone involved to have Pat Knight, to have the Knight family, back in the building. Forgive the linguistics here, but to have the Knight family back in the building tonight, to honor them, standing ovation. Pat Knight kissed the Indiana logo at midcourt. He joked that he'd never come out of the visitors tunnel before, so he got all crossed up and thought that they'd switch the benches from his days as a player and as an assistant under his dad. But he had nothing but nice things to say about it. It was interesting, actually. I guess we'll close with this, to hear him talk about the 3 transfers that Indiana picked up from the Pac-12. He talked about Miles Rice. He talked about Kanan Carlisle. He talked about Omar Ballo, because Pat Knight was a scout for the Pacers for about 10 years before he took the Marian job. And he spent a lot of time focusing on the West Coast. And so he knew those guys well. A lot of praise for the basketball IQ and the competitiveness of guys like Miles Rice and Kanan Carlisle. Obviously, he kind of talked about Omar Ballo and said a lot of what you expect. He said he's seen a ton of Ballo. He knows how dominant he can be. He talked about even some details in his game that he think is improved. And I'll probably put a story together next week, just kind of detailing a little bit more of what Pat Knight said about specifically the 3 Pac-12 transfers that Indiana brought in, because, again, he saw a lot of those guys during his time out in the West Coast with the Pacers. But an emotional night for Indiana, a successful night on the floor for Indiana. We'll leave it there for now. Doing these solo is kind of weird and awkward, and it is, in the end, an expected result, if still a fairly positive one for Indiana in its exhibition finale. Hoosiers are home Wednesday night in the season opener against SIU Edwardsville. We will obviously be up in East Lansing tomorrow for Michigan State. We'll be back here for that game next Wednesday, and then back here, of course, next Saturday for IU Michigan at Memorial Stadium. Until then, for the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. This has been Mind Your Banners Postgame. Thank you so much for listening and watching. If you have been, we will talk to you soon.